Hello, welcome to CESMII Studios and our broadcast of 6 Degrees of Smart Manufacturing. I am Conrad Leva.
And I'm Mike Yost.
In this series, we cover different perspectives and topics on smart manufacturing from the many points of views of practitioners, engineers, integrators, consultants, educators, and manufacturing leaders. The many people involved in this smart manufacturing journey. Today, we have a 20-minute chat with our guest, Vincent Higgins from Honeywell. You can use the Q&A feature to send us questions. However, if we run out of time, we might have to answer some of those questions later at our LinkedIn group. We will give you that link at the end of the show.
Yeah, so for a bit of context for those who haven't joined us before, just very briefly why we talk about 6 degrees of smart manufacturing. It's based on the idea of 6 degrees of separation, which says that we are all just 6 or fewer social connections away from knowing every person on the planet. And if that's true, we have to be just as close to being able to get to the information, the knowledge required to make smart manufacturing a reality. So our goal with this webcast series is to get as many smart people like Vincent to come and join us and share their experiences so we can all learn with and from each other. So with that, we'd like to introduce Vincent. As Conrad said, Vincent is the Global Director and General Manager of the Workforce Competency business at Honeywell inside their digital transformation offerings. He has a long and storied career and brings a lot of expertise in this subject area to us. He's a trusted speaker, author, has experience as a solution provider and as a consultant, and in his role with Honeywell is going to add a lot to the conversation here with us. So, Vincent, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Conrad.
Thank you. And Vincent, we want to start the conversation today. I'm very excited about the topic today of the connected worker because in our conversation on smart manufacturing, we're many times focused on automation. But I would like you to explain to us in your own words, what is the connected worker?
Sure. I love the topic, so happy to speak about it. So we think about all the workers in the world. You know, about 80% of the global workforce is deskless. That is to say, they get up in the morning, they put on their clothes, and they go and they use their hands. It could be in manufacturing, agriculture, in many, many areas. So the fact that many of those workers use their hands, there's another fact that those that are bound to a desk have much higher levels of effectiveness and efficiency. Their lives have changed dramatically through use of things like Zoom, things like planning software and email, and the many things over the last 10 or 20 years that we now take for granted. But the workforce that use their hands out in the field, the first line workers, their lives haven't changed very much at all. If we look in the manufacturing space, if you look like, for instance, in oil and gas, they're still using paper and pencil like they did for the last 20 or 30 years to take observations around what they see in the plant. So the connected worker is really that transformation of the traditional field worker into someone that uses digital tools that grows in effectiveness because they have what they need to do their job better and safer. And so on screen now, you'll see some of the concepts and ideas that surround our image here of our connected worker with his hard hat. On the left-hand side, you see software. Software is a very important part of the next generation digital worker. And software can mean communication software like a Zoom call, but in the field where you have a front-facing camera connected to a hard hat and a display, and essentially you are communicating back to an expert and he's giving you advice. So essentially bringing the expert out into the field virtually and providing assistance and guidance. It also means things like digital workflow, those step-by-step procedures that are needed that are currently being driven by paper or by memory. And this brings the whole question of, the retiring workforce. So many of are having issues around the old ways of doing digital, workflow. And so the new way of doing it is step-by-step procedures around digital workflow. And another area is just IoT data into the field. Field workers typically do not have access to a lot of the data. And that data is not one directional. So you're collecting data as if that person were another object, another.
So how should we, Vincent, how should we look at this? Should we look at this as we're connecting the worker to systems, or the systems are getting connected to the worker? Which way you think is the healthier way to look at it?
Yeah, it's both. It's bi-directional. So it's not, the human person is not a sensor. Some people think of the human person just like a compressor or a heat exchanger or something on the assembly line, where you can collect data and somehow Big Brother, in a Big Brother-ish way, make them more effective. Where are they? What are they doing? What step are they on in a process? How long is it taking to do these steps, etc.? That's, I think, the wrong approach. The person is really at the core of automation. Automation is a big deal in manufacturing. It's making a lot of progress, and there's a lot of great effort going into it. But ultimately, the key decision makers will be the individuals in the field doing the work. We talk about the AI, and there's been many, artificial intelligence, and there's lots of movies about, machines taking over the world. I think the better approach is to think of the person as the key decision maker at the core, at the center, and then allowing the data to leave that person, but also come back. So the beauty of things like cloud and data analytics and machine learning is we collect data about the person and what they're doing in relation to equipment and processes, and then do analytics in the cloud and bring back insights back to the person so they can make better decisions. I'll give you an example. An example would be, I'm about to do a maintenance task, and it's a very rare occasion. Some of this equipment rarely fails. And so I have to figure out, if I haven't looked at this equipment in a long time, so we can do training on demand. We can provide videos on specific steps in the field, in your eyepiece, just before you do the work. Now, what's the best procedure to take? Well, let's compare the maintenance work for this pump or compressor or heat exchanger to thousands of others who have been facing the same thing over time. And if that's the case, that insight, those insights can come back to the worker and provide these new insights. So this next slide really speaks well of the different components that are needed to keep the digital worker truly a digital worker, the key decision maker. And so some of the elements, I already mentioned digitization. It's taking those business processes and moving them from, say, a paper-based or a memory-based situation to one where they're codified in a series of steps, and those steps through something like a connection to SAP or Oracle. So we have a lot of applications that connect into those systems. Honeywell does today. And so all the maintenance records are kept somewhere, typically in SAP or other systems like Oracle, and they become available. And what's happening today, and this is many times the case of the older workers that are closer to retiring rather than the younger ones who are maybe they have less experience, but they're not relying as much on their memory, is that you just skip steps. You're pencil whipping. You're doing things based on memory rather than on the best practice steps to do that. So digitization is a very important part of taking standard business processes that may exist today and bringing up to the next level. Connectivity is also a big element because, as we talked about, it's two-dimensional. The data goes up, but it has to come back down to give those proper insights. So the digital worker has to always be connected. And that's where 5G is a really big deal, particularly in the plant environment. The majority of our customers, I sit in the automation control systems business of Honeywell. Many of those customers do not have connectivity today from a Wi-Fi perspective. So 5G, particularly private 5G, is a great opportunity because it's extremely secure, actually quite a bit more secure than Wi-Fi just because of the nature of it. It's a lot faster. You can, what we call network slice, and have different data sets taking priority over others. And that data can flow back and forth. And sometimes it's video data that takes both directions that require these large bandwidths.
Mike, you
But
were trying to say something there.
Yeah, sorry. I love this. I love this topic.
no, that's not a problem at all. Obviously, there's a lot of technology that's advancing that does the things that you're talking about right now, and with the focus of the worker being served by these technologies, I think it's the right lens, right? It's the right perspective. And I guess from your perspective, how have you seen, like, is this just a conversation whose time has come, or have things like COVID been a dramatic change to elevate this conversation and change the discussion because of the need for keeping people separated more and getting them their information? So has there been any major catalyst like COVID, or is this just something whose time has come?
Yeah, I do see. I see COVID as an accelerant in terms of it is pushing our business forward in a dramatic way. Number one, I think executives in many companies are seeing that work from home has been quite an eye opener. How productive people have been. When I think about remote work, though, and that's we all get invited to webinars, how to improve work at home, work-life balance with your kids on Skype calls or Zoom calls, trying to manage that where you're on a call like this, for instance. My kids aren't home, thank God they're now back at school. But, it really, COVID has really made it, put the spotlight on these sorts of solutions. Because what we're seeing is that we need to enhance the remote work that's being done. And even in our own plants, Honeywell has over 400 manufacturing facilities globally. And when the pandemic started, a lot of those people couldn't show up to work. And so it was a skeleton crew. The experts that had to come in couldn't be coming in to do specific tasks. The OEMs that was equipment being serviced couldn't come in. So in many instances, even in our own facilities, we had to put these wearable technologies, and we'll talk about wearables in just a minute, on our heads. And we had experts and OEMs and people virtually present and guiding and inspecting and doing all sorts of things remotely, wherein typically they would be there in person. And of course, there's lots of savings around travel in that regard. And we saw that recently with Honeywell's factory acceptance testing. So in our automation division of Honeywell, we have one of the largest market shares globally for these sorts of automation technologies. And before they go into the plant, all this large automation equipment has to go through a factory acceptance test. And it usually involves 3 to 4 dozen people going to a site in a factory to test out every aspect before it goes to site acceptance testing. And our customers couldn't go there. So in essence, they had to do that virtually. So our engineers would don the intelligent wearable, what we call it, our heads-up display technology, which is a tablet in the form factor of a wearable, with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and a front-facing camera, voice-enabled, and essentially they were sharing their screen. And we did better in terms of our factory acceptance testing, and not only met but exceeded our schedules by some use of some of these technologies. So just going a little bit into the weeds here, you see on screen, Honeywell is focused on kind of key applications for the digital worker of the future. Now, there are many other applications, and the way we've built and this is mostly an Android, whether tablet or smartphone or wearable, it is, essentially what we're doing is bringing applications, Android-based applications, to these wearable devices. And so the 4 key buckets are expert on call, which is this video chat capability that we're essentially like Zoom, like we're having today. IIoT data available in the field. So essentially bringing data that's typically only visible to folks in the control room or command center now become visible to those in the field. And you think, well, what value is there in that? Well, if the field workers have to make key decisions, then having the data at their fingertips, contextualized. For instance, we have a geolocation, geofencing solution that puts the person in the plant exactly in front of a particular piece of equipment. So at the moment when they need that IIoT data, they're only served up the data associated with the equipment or the situation that's at hand, not because they can't. You can't fit that much information on a screen. So it's all about bringing people at the center of the core of the Internet of Things. Once again,
So,
they are key decision makers.
so
And
Vincent, would you say some of these things have they moved beyond pilot purgatory there at Honeywell? You know, are they still islands of innovation, or are you really rolling it out?
so we started with some pilot purgatory about 3 years ago, and we've since then moved to many large implementations. It took some time, and COVID helped with a few customers to get them over the line to really jump into this full force. They did pilots with 10 or 20 users at a site, and then they moved to 100 users, and now there's thousands, right? So this is not smoke and mirrors technology. This is now truly being used in the field in hazardous areas, both hardware and software. And we continue to develop new apps and expand. Our next step in these, the apps you see on screen here, is really to integrate those apps into a single user experience. So I go into the field, I troubleshoot using a digital workflow. I'm going through a step-by-step procedure. I get stuck on a step. I'm a young worker, not sure exactly what to do. So then I refer to a video, and that brings up the question of the bottom left corner, video assist, which is bringing in videos like kind of like an industrial YouTube into the space. And then if they're still having difficulty, then they call the expert. So it's kind of think of the day in the life of the typical digital worker. It's not all planned. There's a lot of ad hoc work. There's a need for experts to come in and help. There's need for documents and data. And again, pulling back to that understanding of that key decision maker are those folks in the field in collaboration with others.
And what's your experience? What's your experience, Vincent, with those folks in the field? Like, do they want this? Do the workers want to be connected? Can you talk about the benefits that they're getting? And whether they're going to actually, you're going through a lot of work here to put this information in front of them. Are they going to actually want it and accept it and work this way in the future?
Yeah, it's been an interesting cultural experience. So there are some companies that are more open to these technologies than others. I think that the cultures that are really interested in the safety and well-being above all else, it's an easier adaptation because there's a lot of safety components to this too. If there's a hazardous gas leak or if there's a problem with equipment that could put a person in danger, they're immediately alerted through these connection of the different pieces of data back to the connected worker. So, and I've been surprised how many older workers have really taken this on because they see the value. And of the applications you see on screen here, the one that really gets you started fast is the expert on call, because it doesn't require anything but having an app on both sides, the expert in the office or a web browser in the office and an expert in the field, and you can get started communicating. For instance, one of our big customers, our early adopters, moved essentially their walkie-talkie communications became video. And we didn't expect that. We expected it to be very gradual, but within just a few weeks, the walkie-talkie was started to be used less, and the video chat started to use more because a video is worth 1,000 words or 10,000.
And if you had time to quantify some of the benefits, if you're able to share some of that, I'm sure people are curious about it.
So we had a customer. I spent a lot of time in the North Sea, not offshore, onshore, in Oslo and other places, with some of our key customers. And we had the CFO and the CIO and a couple of people in the room, and I challenged them in a workshop, and I said, let's take a scenario. Think about the unplanned work offshore. So planned work is when you go out offshore, you know what's broken or what needs to be fixed, your typical maintenance you do. But many instances, something happens that's unexpected, what they call unplanned work. And so you got to wake up a special engineer in the middle of the night, put them on a helicopter and send them offshore. Just that trip back and forth is about $10,000. Then you have to have him overnight. Then you have to have his per diem, plus the overtime, plus everything else. So they did a very quick on the behind the napkin kind of communication, what that looked like. And it was about $5 or $6 million in a 3-month period. And then I said, what if you could have someone in the field with a wearable device where you could do some of that unplanned work, even if it's a percentage of the unplanned work? how much money would that save you? And it paid back from an ROI perspective. Our solution was paid back in 3 weeks because of simply because of a reduction in unplanned work. So that's maybe an extreme example because of the travel time and the expense in travel. If you don't have to travel as much, if you're in a plant environment or a manufacturing facility, then there's less travel time. But we've seen a very quick ROI, payback on some of these technologies in ways that we didn't expect. Which brings me to the whole question of long-term adoption. I remember my iPhone. I'm a real techie kind of guy. I stood in line for 3 hours in the rain in Houston, outside the Verizon store to get my first iPhone the first day it came out. And I walked out with a new number. It was 4,500. I got even 2 zeros at the end. So because it was a whole new set of numbers that you could choose from. And I used it for email and texting, and that's about it. Today, I couldn't live without that. And so when you look at these applications on screen here as kind of key applications, I can't even imagine 10 years from now or 5 years from now in a manufacturing facility, what sorts of apps will be developed similar to my experience with the iPhone. What's the analogy for Uber or for ordering online or all those different things? What will we see in the future? And because this is open Android platform, we allow our customers to build apps for tablets and then convert them over as needed to a wearable device, which is pretty straightforward, to voice-enabled systems. So the sky's the limit, and we won't know exactly how this will pan out until it happens.
Well, I think two things. First of all, the time has flown by us. We are at the end of the allotted time that we have here, and as we knew, that time would go quickly. But I think again, the sky is the limit, and as long as we are putting the focus on the workers and having the technology serve the workers, I think that the sky is the limit from that perspective. But as is our practice here, Vincent, we like to let you take us out here and give the folks that are watching the takeaway. So if you could just sort of give us a final takeaway for everybody from today's discussion.
Sure. People are sometimes scared of automation in that, will it replace jobs? And, in some cases it might. In some cases, we've all had to pivot from one career to another, or that we've had to retool or study up on things like AI and machine learning. But I think when we talk about automation, in the short and in the long term, that the person, the individual, the decision maker, will be at the core of the Internet of Things, continue to be the decision maker. AI will not replace the person. Machine learning will not replace critical thinking in the workplace. So it's not to be afraid, but rather to embrace these technologies and then be transformed by them, be excited with them. And again, as we talked about, the sky's the limit. Let's be part of that wave of the next generation digital worker.
What a great parting thought. Thank you, Vincent, for your time today. And folks, remember to continue the conversation with us in our LinkedIn group. Here's the information and the link to that. And we have some great upcoming shows for you. The next one will be on modeling and optimizing energy usage with Joe Kufi from Penn State. And then we will have a couple of great episodes, one a retrospective of the year in smart manufacturing, and another one to end the year looking ahead at what's in front of us for 2021. The year is coming.
I'm already
going so fast. So thanks again, Vincent.
My pleasure.
Mike, for joining us today.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.